Emily had always been the perfect wife. To anyone who looked at her and her husband David, they seemed to be the epitome of a loving, successful couple. Their friends admired their bond, their families envied their stability, and everyone believed they had it all: the house, the careers, and even the perfect love story. But love, Emily realized one cold winter evening, was more fragile than she had ever imagined. It started innocuously enough. David had been busy with work, often coming home late. Emily, always understanding, didn't mind the long hours. She found comfort in their shared silence at the end of the day. She would curl up with a book, sipping on tea, while David would retreat into his study. But soon, things began to change in subtle ways. One evening, David's phone buzzed incessantly, a message after message, each one more frequent and urgent. Emily glanced at him as he kept his gaze fixed on the screen, his brow furrowing. The smile he had given her moments earlier had vanished, replaced by an almost imperceptible tension. The buzzing continued, and the once warm atmosphere between them started to feel strained. "What's going on?" Emily asked softly, a faint edge of concern creeping into her voice. David glanced up at her, almost too quickly, as if startled by the interruption. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just work stuff," he replied, his tone dismissive. "I'll deal with it in the morning." But Emily didn't feel reassured. Something in his voice didn't sit right with her. For days, she noticed the same pattern: the phone calls, the late nights, the hurried exits from their bedroom. She could sense the growing distance between them, even though David never outright acknowledged it. And then, one evening, when she decided to take a closer look, she found something she hadn't expected. The message wasn't work-related. It wasn't from a client or a colleague. It was from someone named Sophie. And it wasn't just a work update. It was personal. Too personal. The discovery was a shock to Emily, one that she hadn't anticipated. She stared at the phone in her hand, her heart racing as the words on the screen made everything inside her twist into knots. The message read, "I can't stop thinking about you. I know we agreed not to tell anyone yet, but I need to hear your voice tonight. I miss you." Her breath caught in her throat. Sophie. Emily had never heard of this person before. She'd never seen this name in the contacts. But the intimacy in the message was undeniable. It was clear this was more than just a professional relationship. As she sat frozen, staring at the screen, her mind raced. The first thought that came to her was, why didn't David tell me? The second thought, the more painful one, was, how long has this been going on? A cold wave of realization washed over her. The distance she had been feeling, the late nights, the secretive behavior, the inability to truly connect with him anymore. It all suddenly made sense. But there was one thing she still didn't understand. How could David betray her like this? She wasn't one to jump to conclusions, but the evidence was staring her in the face. And as much as she wanted to confront him immediately, she knew she needed more answers. The decision to wait and observe, to gather more details before acting, felt like the only choice she had. The next few days felt like an eternity. Emily watched David closely, noting the subtle changes in his behavior. He was more distant than ever, constantly on his phone, excusing himself to take calls in private. But when he was at home, he was charming, loving even. He had no idea that she had seen the messages, and she wasn't sure how to approach him without sounding paranoid. Finally, after what felt like days of suspense, Emily decided to confront him. The question she needed to ask hung in the air like an invisible weight between them. One evening, as they sat across from each other at the dinner table, Emily took a deep breath and looked into David's eyes. Her voice was steady, but inside, she was trembling. "David," she began softly, "there's something I need to ask you. I found a message on your phone from someone named Sophie." David froze, his hand pausing mid-bite. For a moment, he didn't speak. His face went pale, and Emily could see the panic in his eyes. I can explain, he finally said, his voice tight. It's not what you think. But Emily had heard enough. She didn't need him to explain. The betrayal was already clear. Emily didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything. She had always believed in trust. It was the foundation of their relationship, something that had held them together for so many years. But now, that trust was shattered. She thought about the future. Could she ever forgive him? Could they rebuild what they once had? Or was this the end of everything? The next morning, Emily decided to take a walk to clear her mind. She needed space. She needed to think. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't live in a relationship built on lies. I'm so sorry, Emily, he said, his voice breaking. I was weak. I made a mistake. But it was nothing. Nothing like what you're thinking. I never wanted to hurt you. Emily took a deep breath, looking at the man she had loved for so long, the man who had broken her heart. It was time for her to make the hardest decision of her life.